The Hobbit. We are on part 18. Let's begin.
"I am Gandalf," said the wizard. "Never heard of him," growled the man. "And what's this little fellow?" he said, stooping down to frown at the Hobbit with his bushy black eyebrows. "That is Mr. Baggins of Hobbit, of good family and unimpeachable reputation," said Gandalf.
Bilbo bowed. He had no hat to take off, and he was painfully conscious of his many missing buttons.
"I am a wizard," continued Gandalf. "I have heard of you, even if you have not heard of me. But perhaps you have heard of my good cousin Radagast, who lives in the southern borders of Mirkwood?" "Yes, not a bad fellow as wizards go, I believe. I used to see him now and again," said Beorn. "Well, now that I know who you are and who you say you are, what do you want?" "To tell the truth, we have lost our luggage and nearly lost our way and are rather in need of help, or at least advice. I may say we've had a bad time with goblins in the mountains." "Goblins?" said the big man less gruffly. "Ho, ho! So you've been having trouble with them, have you? What did you go near them for?" "We did not mean to. They surprised us in the night in a pass, which we had to cross when we were coming out of the lands over the west into the country. It is a long tale." "Then you had better come inside and tell me some of it, if it won't take all day."
And said the man, leading the way to the dark door that opened out of the courtyard into the house. Following him, they found themselves in a wide hall with the fireplace in the middle. Though it was summer, there was a wood fire burning and smoke rising into the blackened rafters in search of a way out through an opening in the roof. They passed through the dim hall, lit only by the fire and the hole above it, and came through another small door into a sort of veranda popped out onto the wooden posts made of single tree trunks. It faced south, and it was still warm and filled with light of the western sun, which slanted into it, and fell golden onto the garden full of flowers that came right up to the steps. Here he sat on wooden benches while Gandalf began to tell his tale, and Bilbo swung his dangling legs and looked at the flowers in the garden and wondered what their names could be, as he had never seen half of them before. "I was coming over the mountains with a friend or two," said the wizard. "Or two? I only see one, and a little one at that," said Beorn. "Well, to tell you the truth, I did not want to bother you with a lot of us until I found out if you were busy. I will give a call, if I may." "Go on, call away." So Gandalf gave a long, shrill whistle, and presently Thorin and Dori came round the house by the garden path and stood bowing low before them.
"One or three, you meant, I see," said Beorn. "But these aren't hobbits, they are dwarves."
"Thorin Oakenshield, at your service." "Dori, at your service," said the two dwarves, bowing again.
"I don't need your service, thank you," said Beorn, "but I expect you need mine. I am not over fond of dwarves, but if it's true you are Thorin, son of Thrain, son of Thror, I believe, and that your companion is respectable, and that you are enemies of goblins and are not up to any mischiefs in my lands, what are you up to, by the way?" "They were on their way to visit the lands of their fathers, away east beyond Mirkwood," put in Gandalf, "and it is entirely by accident that we are in your lands at all. We were crossing by the high pass that should have brought us to the road that lies to the south of your country, when we were attacked by evil goblins, as I was about to tell you." "Go on telling, then," said Beorn, who was never very polite. "There was a terrible storm. The stone giants were out hurling rocks and at the head of the pass we took refuge in a cave. The Hobbit, and I, and several of our companions." "Do you call two several?" "Well, no, as a matter of fact, there were more than two." "And where are they? Killed? Eaten? Gone home?"
"Well, no, they don't seem to have all come when I whistled."
"Shy, I expect."
"You see, we are very much afraid that we were rather a lot for you to entertain."
"Go on and whistle again. I am in for a party, it seems, and one or two more won't make any difference," growled Bjorn.
Gandalf whistled again, and Nori and Ori were there almost before he had stopped, for, if you remember, Gandalf had told them to come in pairs every 5 minutes.
"Hello," said Bjorn. "You came pretty quick. Where were you hiding? Come on, my jack-in-the-boxes."
"Nori at your service, Ori at—" they began, but Bjorn interrupted them.
"Thank you. When I want your help, I will ask for it. Sit down, and let's get on with this tale, or it will be supper time before it's ended."
"Thank you. As soon as we were asleep," went on Gandalf, "a crack opened at the back of the cave,
and goblins came out and grabbed the Hobbit and the dwarves and our troop of ponies." "Troop of ponies? What were you, a traveling circus? Or were you carrying lots of goods? Or do you always call 6 a troop?"
"Oh, no, as a matter of fact, there were more than 6 ponies, for there were more than 6 of us. And, well, here are 2 more." Just at that moment Balin and Dwalin appeared and bowed low with their beards swept to the stone floor. The big man was frowning at first, but they just did their best at being frightfully polite and kept nodding and bending and bowing and waving their hoods before their knees in proper dwarf fashion, till he stopped frowning and burst into a chuckling laugh. They looked so comical.
"Troop was right," he said. "A fine comic one. Come in, my merry men, and what are your names? I don't want your service just now, only your names, and then sit down and stop wagging."
"Balin and Dwalin," they said, not daring to be offended, and they sat flop down on the floor, looking rather surprised.
"Now, go on again," said Bjorn to the wizard. "Where was I? Oh, yes, I was not grabbed. I killed a goblin or 2 with a flash." "Good," growled Bjorn. "It is some good being a wizard, then." "And slipped inside the crack before it closed. I followed down the main hall, which was crowded with goblins. The great goblin was there with 30 or 40 armed guards, and I thought to myself, even if they were not all chained together, what can a dozen do against so many?" "A dozen? That's the first time I've heard 8 called a dozen. Or you still have got some more jacks that haven't come out of their boxes."
"Well, yes, there seem to be a couple here now, Feely and Keely, I believe," said Gandalf, as the 2 now appeared, smiling and bowing.
"That's enough," said Bjorn. "Sit down and be quiet. Now go on, Gandalf."
So Gandalf went on with his tale, until he came to the fight in the dark, and the discovery in the lower gate, and their horror when they found that Mr. Baggins was missing.
"We counted ourselves and found that there was no Hobbit. There was only 14 of us." 14? That's the first time I've heard 1 from 10 leaves 14. You mean 9? Or else you haven't told me all the names of your party."
"Well, of course you haven't seen Owen and Glowin yet, and bless me, there they are. I hope you will forgive them for bothering you."
"Oh, let 'em all come. Hurry up, come along, you 2, and sit down. But look here, Gandalf, even now we have only got yourself and 10 dwarves and the Hobbit that was lost. That only makes 11, plus 1 mislaid, and not 14, unless wizards count differently than other people do. But please, get on with the tale."
Bjorn did not show it, more than he could help, but he had really begun to get very interested. You see, In the old days, he had known this part of the mountains that Gandalf had described. He nodded and he growled, and when he heard of the hobbits' reappearance and their scramble down the stone slide, and of the wolf ring in the woods, when Gandalf came to their climbing into the trees and the wolves all underneath, he got up and strode about and muttered, "I wish I had been there. I would have given them more than fireworks." "Well," said Gandalf, very glad to see his tale was making a good impression, "I did the best I could." There we were, with wolves going mad underneath us, and the forest beginning to blaze in places, when the goblins came down from the hills and they discovered us. They yelled with delight and sang songs, making fun of us. 15 birds and 5 fir trees. "Good heavens," said Bjorn. "Don't pretend goblins can't count. They can. 12 isn't 15, and they know it. And so do it. There were Biffer and Bofer as well. I haven't ventured to introduce them before, but here they are." In came Biffer and Bofer. "And me," gasped Bomber, puffing up behind. He was fat and also angry at being left till last. He refused to wait 5 minutes and followed immediately after the old two. "Well, now there are 15 of you, and since goblins can count, I suppose that is all that were up in the trees. Now perhaps we can finish this story without any more interruptions." Mr. Baggins saw how clever Gandalf had been. The interruptions had really made Bjorn more interested in the story, and the story had kept him from sending off the dwarves at once like suspicious beggars. He never invited people into his house if he could help it. Here he had very few friends, and they lived a good way away. And now he had gotten 15 strangers in his porch. By the time the wizard had finished his tale and had told of the eagle's rescue and of how they had all been brought to the Carrock, and the sun was falling behind the peaks of the misty mountains. Lost my place. And the shadows were long in Bjorn's garden. "A very good tale," said he. "The best I have heard for a good long while. If all beggars had tales such a good one, they might find me kinder. You may be making it all up, of course, but you deserve a supper for the story all the same. Let's have something to eat." "Yes, please," they all said together. "Thank you very much." Inside the hall it was now quite dark. Bjorn clapped his hands, and in trotted 4 beautiful white ponies and several large, long-bodied gray dogs. Bjorn said something to them in a queer language, like animal noises, turned into talk. They went out again and soon came back carrying torches in their mouths, which they lit at the fire and stuck in low brackets on the pillars of the hall about the central hearth. The dogs could stand on their hind legs when they wished, and carry things with their forefeet. Quickly they got out boards and trestles from the side walls and set them up near the fire, and then "ma, ma, ma" was heard, and in came some snow-white sheep, led by a large coal-black ram. One bore a white cloth embroidered at the edges with figures of animals. Another bore on their broad backs trays and bowls and platters and knives and wooden spoons, which the dogs took and quickly laid out on the trestled tables. These were very low enough even for Bilbo to sit comfortably. Beside them a pony pushed 2 low-seated benches with wide rush bottoms and little short thick legs for Gandalf and Thorin, while at the far end he put Bjorn's big black chair of the same sort, in which he sat with his great legs stuck far out under the table. These were all the chairs he had in his hall, and probably had them low like the tables for the convenience of the wonderful animals that waited on him. What did the rest sit on? they were not forgotten. The other ponies came in rolling round drum-shaped sections of logs, smooth and polished, and low enough even for Bilbo, so soon they were all seated at Beorn's table, and the hall had not seen such a gathering for many a year. There they had a supper or a dinner such as they had not seen since they left the last homely house in the west and said goodbye to Elrond. The light of the torches and the fire flickering about them, and on the table 2 tall red beeswax candles. All the time they ate, Beorn in his deep rolling voice told tales of the wild land on his side of the mountains, and especially of the dark and dangerous woods that lay outstretched far north and south, a day's ride before them, barring their way to the east, the terrible forest of Mirkwood. And if you want to find out what happens when the Hobbit and his companions journey to Mirkwood, we will cover that in the next part. Thank you for watching Role Play Riot.